refresh on quadratics. Here, you should be on the side of your paper that says the quadratic family. It says in Unit 3, that's not correct for this year. This is printed before, it was a different order. But we have in the past, I will say that. I'm going to edit mine. In the past, we learned how to graph quadratic functions by making transformations on the parent function. Okay, you learned that, I think, originally in Algebra 1, and then you did a whole big quadratic unit in Algebra 2. And at the beginning of this year, we did a review of transformation and parent functions, and we reviewed that process. Okay, so remember that a times x minus h squared plus k. Okay, that's our vertex form of the equation. Okay, so we're going to look at different ways, though, that the quadratic equation could be written. Okay, so we are not going to use Desmos initially. It says without Desmos. We want to see if we can remember how to do axis of symmetry and vertex to graph that. Okay, so looking at this equation, when it's in that format, okay, the a times x minus h squared plus k, what do that a, h, and k tell us? What's that going to help us do? What do y'all remember? Do you remember what part of that, where the vertex comes from? K is a part of it. And what else? H. Okay, so your vertex is HK. Okay, because remember, inside the parentheses there, that's the horizontal shift, and the K outside is the vertical shift. So that's like the X value of your vertex and the Y value of your vertex. Okay, and so remember, it's the opposite sign inside. So in our equation, since it's -1, that means our H is +1. Okay, and then K, you keep the sign that it's the number that's added or subtracted on the outside. So since it's -4, this is -4. So we know that there's a vertex at 1, -4. Now, what else can you tell me about this parabola based on this equation? Yeah, the axis of symmetry comes from the y, or excuse me, it's the vertical line of symmetry that cuts the parabola in half. So it comes from the x value of your vertex, in this case 1. And it's a vertical line. It's going to cross the x-axis. So it's x equals 1. So we draw that typically as a dashed line. It's not actually part of the graph, but we want to have it visualized. So that's why it's dashed. What else? All I have is a dashed line and a point so far. Okay, so we know that it's what value are you looking at to see if it's going to be opening up or down? What part of the equation tells you that? The A right there, right? Okay, our A is greater than 0, meaning it's positive. So that means my parabola is going to open up. If my A were less than 0, if it were negative, if there was a negative outside that parenthesis there, my parabola would be opening down, right? So I know this parabola is going to open up, but what about the width? How wide should I make it? Is there any stretch to this graph from the parent function? The stretch would show up as the A value, right? The vertical stretch. If it was something other than 1, it would stretch it vertically or compress it vertically. And if there was a number multiplied on the inside times x, that would stretch or compress it horizontally. But there is nothing there being multiplied inside or outside. So this is not going to be stretched or compressed. It's going to be just the standard width of the parent function, which, if you don't remember from your vertex, that's over 1 up 1, because it's 1 squared is 1, or it's over 2 up 4, because 2 squared is 4, right? And we said this is a line of symmetry. So everything we're doing on this right side, couldn't we do on this left side as well? And that will help me sketch my parabola. Okay, this was vertex form. We could see the vertex. Okay, so that's our vertex form, where HK is the vertex and the axis of symmetry is x equals whatever that H is. Okay, now how are H and K related to this graph? I mean, it's what we just, I kind of wrote it up here, but that essentially you just want to know that the vertex is HK and the axis of symmetry is x equals H. Feel so far so good? Okay. In number 2, it says we can also write quadratic functions in this format. Y equals a times x minus p times x minus q. Okay, they want us to graph each of these functions. It says using Desmos and find the vertex. I'm going to go ahead and plot some of these points without pulling up Desmos, because I think you're able to do that. If it is this is factored form, isn't it? This is what we just got through reviewing, is factoring quadratics to put them in this form. Okay, and sometimes a GCF is out here. This one doesn't have one. This one, a negative was pulled out. This one, a 2 was pulled out. Okay, that's that. Scroll up just a 10. That's that A value. Okay, here it's an understood 1 because nothing's there. Okay, but when you're in factored form, what did we talk about? The whole point of factoring is to solve the equation, right? If we plugged in a 0 for y, and then we would split and solve. So if we set x plus 1 equal to 0 and solved, wouldn't x be -1? So that means there's a solution at -1. That means an x-intercept on the x-axis at -1, the graph crosses or touches. Okay, what would be the solution for this factor? Yeah, +3 is what would make that 0. So at +3, there's another intercept. Okay, and I know that my A value is an understood +1, so I know this one's opening up, right? Going in this direction. Okay, but I really don't have any other information just based on the zeros and what direction it should be. But let me go ahead and list those x-intercepts. Those x-intercepts are at -1 and 3. That's if I solved for x there. Now, if I want to know my vertex, we haven't reviewed doing that from this form yet, so that's why it says using Desmos and find the vertex. So I'm just going to save us a little bit. Well, no, I'll pull it up and show you. I was going to say I'll save us some time, but it won't take long to show you. So it was x plus 1 times x minus 3. So we got those x-intercepts correct at -1 and +3. And you can see here the vertex is at 1, -4. So what does that mean where the axis of symmetry would be? Yeah, that means my h is 1, so it would be x equals 1. So I could draw that again as the dashed line. And sketch my parabola. Okay, so if I do the same thing for b, what are the solutions? What are the x-intercepts if I solve each of these factors? 1 and -2. So +1 and -2. Okay, I will save us some time. This one, the vertex comes out to be -0.5, 2.25. So -0.5 and +2.25. So just above the 2 there. And I knew right away that this one was going to open down because of that negative, right? I knew it was going to be opening down. So where is this axis of symmetry? Yeah, -0.5, -1/2. Okay, what would be the solutions for C? +1 and +3. So both positive because that was x minus 1 and x minus 3. So +1 and +3. Is this one going to open up or down? Yeah, that A value is positive, so I know it's opening up. Okay, if you went and looked at this graph, your vertex is at 2, -2. So your axis of symmetry is at 2. I totally missed that vertex. Try that again. Now looking at these, we said that this is in the form x minus p, x minus q. How are the p and the q related to the graph? What part of the graph do p and q end up being? The x-intercepts, yeah. Good. Okay, how could you find the vertex without using the graphing calculator, without going and looking at the graph? Any ideas on where we could find the vertex? How does it compare to those x-intercepts we just found? Look at where the axis of symmetry is in comparison to your zeros, your solutions. Where is it always? It's right in the middle of those zeros, right? So the x value we could find by just going halfway between the zeros. And then how could I find the y value? If I know the equation, what could I do? If I know the x value, could I plug it in for x and solve and see what y is? Yeah. So I could do that without looking at the graph. Okay, so the x value is exactly the middle of the x-intercepts. Then plug in for x. Oops. in the equation and solve for y. So what you're actually doing there, if you think about it, we said the x-intercepts are P and Q, aren't they? So if I want to find halfway between P and Q, what is halfway between two numbers called? If you get two test grades and you want to know what's halfway between them, what are you finding? The average. So you're averaging the intercepts. So if you think about this, to get the x value of your vertex, you're doing P plus Q divided by 2. You're finding the average. Okay, to get the x of the vertex, you do P plus Q divided by 2, and then plug in x to get y. Mathematically, that's what you're doing. Good? All right, so on the back, if you'll flip this over, we're going to fill in these quick notes. Okay, I'm going to split this into thirds because there are 3 forms of quadratic equations. So the first one we're going to talk about is vertex form. And then we're going to talk about intercept form. That's what we just looked at. That's like your factored form where you can see the factors. You see the x-intercepts. Okay, and then we're going to talk about general or standard form. Okay, so vertex form is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. When it's in this form, we can see the vertex is hk. The axis of symmetry is x equals h. And A gives the vertical stretch. So far, so good. Okay, in intercept form, we have the A factored out, and then you have x minus p times x minus q. Okay, so our factored form or intercept form, where your x-intercepts are p and q. You use those to get the vertex we just said. You do p plus q divided by 2. And plug in. I'm going to make a little note here. When you're doing this, be careful. Common mistake is dealing with negatives. Be careful of your negatives when you're finding your average. Remember, you're doing the opposite. It's x minus p. So if this was x plus 3, your p is actually negative 3, right? So just be careful of your negatives there. All right, standard form This is the one we've been practicing factoring the past couple days. Ax squared plus bx plus c. And this is the form where you learned back in Algebra 2, I'll refresh your memory, to get the vertex from standard form, you have to do negative b divided by 2a. That gives you your x. Okay, and then you do the same thing, you plug in to get y once you find that x. Okay, on both of these, when you're finding the x of your vertex, that is your axis of symmetry. Your axis of symmetry is the x value of your vertex, right? So keep that in mind. You can always switch to standard form. So to get standard form from one of the other forms, you just use distribution FOIL and simplify. Does that make sense? I could come over here and I could FOIL this out and then distribute the A, and I would be in standard form, right? Over here, I would have to do x minus h times itself. That's what squared means. I'd have to FOIL it out, distribute the a, and then simplify and add the k. So you can change from these forms to standard form, and you can change from standard form to these forms. We just were practicing standard form to intercept form yesterday, right? Okay. I'm not going to currently ask you to go from standard to vertex form. That's the completing the square process. You may remember that, but it's been a while since you've done it. We're not going to worry about it for now. Y'all feel good about this little quadratic review? Okay, you can try these check for understanding questions. And then I want you to go in and do the Desmos. I had you sign up for the Desmos classroom yesterday. Let me go back to our It's Learning page. If you did not do this yesterday, you will need to do it because the Desmos is an assignment. It is a grade. It needs to be done. So if you go into our It's Learning, to our resources, Unit 5, assignments, oh, it's kind of out of order. That's weird. Oh, well, it shows it in order there. You can switch it. Okay, there we go. So today's the 24th. You have Desmos Match My Parabola activity. Okay, here's the link and the class code for you go to your class period 1 and you would have to set up the account and join the class period if you did not do that yesterday. I think the majority of you did this yesterday when I asked you to. So now you can go to Desmos Classroom and log in, and you should see that Can You Match My Parabola assigned to you. And that's what you should be working on. That's your assignment for today. Okay. All right, as a reminder, I will not be here next week until Friday. I have our district golf tournaments are next week for the boys and girls, and golf coaches have to work both of those because they're big tournaments and we all have to be there to help. So you're going to have, I think, at least 2 different subs. I know Mr. Cruz we've had before, who is capable of answering your questions and helping you with math, will be here, I believe, Tuesday, Thursday. So he'll be able to answer some questions for you if you get stuck on what you're doing. I don't know exactly who it is going to be Monday and Wednesday, if they will be able to help you or they'll just be here to monitor and guide and hand stuff out. Monday, your plan is to take a quiz. and I say quiz in air quotes because it's not counting as a quiz grade. It will just be a regular daily grade, but you're going to take it like you would take a quiz. You're not going to get your notes. You're not going to talk to each other. You're going to take it in class. There's a time limit, okay? And just do the best you can to kind of quiz yourself on your quadratics knowledge, okay? And then there will be the correct, it's in Delta Math. Your correction assignment will be attached to that once you do that, and you'll be able to earn 100% of your points back. So even if you bomb the quiz, you can go back and do the corrections to get all your points back and get that grade up to 100, as long as you do it on time. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I set it up to where the videos will be hidden, the help videos in Delta Math. You won't be able to access those while you're taking the quiz, but I am leaving the show example button active. So while you're taking the quiz, if you're stuck, you could click on show example, worked out, and then go back and try yours. Okay, but just remember, even if you get a bad grade, if you're not happy with that grade, you'll be able to do the corrections that are attached to it and get points back. And then on Tuesday, you'll get another paper like you got today. It's going to be that same format where there'll be a little like introduction activity review kind of, and then there'll be a box on the back for quick notes. And then there will be some check for understanding questions. But since I'm not going to be here to walk through it with you and do the quick notes and answer questions, it will be set up as a quizzes lesson, just like this past Tuesday, where you got the handout from the sub, the paper, but then you have to go to quizzes and go through the slides, and there will be some video attached so you can watch and the lesson and get the quick notes and help you get through that topic. Does that make sense? So you will have to go to quizzes. It goes along with the handout you will get. Okay, so make sure that you aren't just getting the handout and trying to just do it all on your own. Actually go to quizzes, and it's like a guided lesson that you'll go through with that handout. And that'll be for Tuesday and Wednesday. So it'll be 2 lessons like that in a row. And then Thursday will be a practice day over those 2 topics. Okay, most likely Delta Math practice online for both of those 2 topics from Tuesday and Wednesday. And you would also be able to use Thursday to work on those quiz corrections from Monday's quiz if you need to. And then I'll be back on Friday. Okay. The sub note will have all this, so whoever's our sub will have those instructions, but I wanted to make sure I shared them with you. And then of course I'll post the assignments, the instructions in It's Learning as well. Remember, you go to the overview page, and that's where announcements are. Like for my absences for PSAT testing before earlier this week was there. So I'll make sure and put an announcement with the agenda for the week of what you're expected to do each day. Okay. All right.